you.
Great, thank you. Well, then we can start. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the 21st conversation on agroecology. Today we will walk from fields to tables and we will learn about values, diets, and social dimensions of agroecology. I'm 𝗀𝗲𝗿𝗀 and along with my colleague 𝗂𝗃𝗃 from INIAF in Portugal, I'm pleased to moderate this conversation. I do represent the Austrian Agency for Health and Food Safety, which is short AGES, and my colleague Dennis Bergamo, he will be handling all the technical aspects, and you can also chat with him in case you have any technical issues during the event. Agroecology, the European Partnership on Accelerating Farming Systems Transition, Agroecology Living Labs and Research Infrastructures, is a collaborative research and innovation initiative involving the European Commission and 31 member states, associated countries, and third countries, which makes a total of 111 partner organizations at the moment. And these conversations aim to enhance agricultural knowledge and innovation systems, short 𝗲𝗃𝗃, for the agroecological transition by connecting living labs and research infrastructures and their actors across Europe and beyond. And in our monthly online discussions, our conversations, they will continue throughout the partnership until the end of 2033, promoting the engagement and networking of agroecology stakeholders. And in 2026, our conversations emphasize the 13 principles of agroecology, and today's talks are related to the principle of social values and diets. And we now also have a community of practice. It's a group available at the Agroecology TPP Communities platform. And this community is designed not only to keep you updated on the conversations, but most importantly, to give you a space to connect with the fellow members, exchange ideas, ask questions, and share your knowledge. We also have a dedicated forum on the conversations where you can discuss and share the thoughts of today's conversations even after the event. And through the link on the next slide, you can access the group and join it by creating an account. And once you are a member, we would also love to hear about you. You can make a post introducing yourself and share what you hope to gain from this community. And in case you have any technical issues, you can contact me. I'm the group admin, and 𝗂𝗃𝗃𝗃 Nicolaou. She's already been posting quite some posts in our community. She's the community manager, and she'll be handling the communication. So let's talk about today. We are going to have, as always, two presentations, and the first one will be given by Esther Milberg-Muñiz. She's doing her PhD at Wageningen University in the Netherlands, and she's also an external member of the Women Working Group of the Brazilian Association of Agroecology. She will introduce us to transversalizing gender and racial justice in agroecology, a critical social science perspective from grassroots innovation to policy implementation in Brazil. And our second speaker, she's 𝗬𝗎𝗄𝗃, and she's a senior advocate officer at Slow Food. And she will teach us about how to move towards good, clean, and fair food systems. And after these two talks, we will have, as always, the opportunity to discuss together. So there's the part where you can actively speak as well. Before we begin, let's quickly go through the conversation play rules. Please ensure a good technical quality by keeping your microphones muted when you're not speaking and your camera closed when your connection is not well. And you are free to join the conversations by speaking up, or you can also use the chat if you feel more comfortable this way. And we do respect everybody's opinion, but please keep your questions short and simple. And comments and ideas are very important and also highly welcomed. And as you saw, we started already the recording. I really wanted to ask if anyone has objections to the recording. Looks good. Great. Then we can start. So without further ado, I would like to hand the floor over to Esther.
Thank you. I will okay, I will share my slides. Let me see when it's
looks good.
from the beginning.
Yes, perfect.
Okay.
Yes, looks perfect.
So, thanks for the introduction, Julia. I shortened my title a little bit. I'm gonna talk about transversalizing gender and racial justice in agroecology. Um, and I want to start with something that I feel that we have to start with always when we talk about agroecology, the genealogy of agroecology. Because as many of you know, agroecology has co-evolved with indigenous and peasant ancestral practices. And these have emerged next to ecological practices. These are also epistemic, about knowledge, social and political practices. And so when we think about the efforts of indigenous people for self-determination, for decolonizing knowledge, universities, how research and funding schemes work, that is directly linked to agroecological practices, as they have been doing the work, the trial and error of agroecological practices for more than decades. And this is an important thing to start with because I think it needs to be somewhat the starting point of any type of research. And so if agroecological practices then emerge from struggles over land, knowledge, self-determination, and the relationship to land that is much more than ecological practices or subsistence, but it is a memory, it's a place for collective agency, and much more, then studying cropping systems, soil health, ecosystems cannot be done in silos from this. So why is critical social science so important? And I want to mention here that I think it should be transversal and not just integrated, but transversal to all elements. Because agroecology in the end is also about power. And power transcends all of the elements that the 𝗊𝗶𝗆 definition has made that we're going to talk and that you talk about in these conversations. It's about who controls land, who controls seeds, who controls water. It's about who controls knowledge, what knowledge counts, and does it count as much as scientific practice, especially considering it has been years of trial and error. Who defines what is scientific? And also, of course, who benefits from agroecological transitions and what structural injustices do we have to break with in order to, for example, really attain to the elements of fairness, co-creation, and especially gender and racial justice. So, for example, if we look at a place where the primary stewards of agrobiodiversity are women, which is not everywhere, but in many places of the world, then limiting the woman's agency and power also limits biodiversity directly, right? If you limit what they can plant, if they have land rights, whether they have decision power over their own territories, then that directly affects biodiversity. And so gender justice is therefore not an added social goal, as sometimes might be done with all best intentions, but it is part of an ecological foundation of agroecology itself as well. And I hope to show this through the experience of women farmers in Bahia that can give us a concrete example of this. So this is part of the work I do and the people I work with in Bahia and Brazil. And I want to first give a little bit of the context. So we are in Bahia, northeast of Brazil, one of the poorest and driest regions, but also most resilient regions of Brazil, where women have been central to agroecology and its production, yet remain structurally marginalized, something that might not be a surprise to you. So women manage most of the biodiversity, in contrast to men that are mostly set on monocultures. Even within one household family, the woman is doing all the biodiverse production, and the men stay, for example, with the cows or with honey because that's where the money is. Formal agroecological spaces remain male-dominated, decision-making spaces, cooperatives, even within agroecological movements, even the landless movement, for example, that is very well known in Brazil, the MST. Especially those that generate monetary income, as I said. Women often lack the land and rights and recognition of the lands they actually work. And this really, really makes it difficult for them and a constant fight to actually work agroecologically. So, to kind of contest and challenge this situation, the feminist network in agroecology in Brazil, GT Mulheres de ANA, the working group of the National Association that was just mentioned, but also the Center of Alternative Technology, NGOs, loose activists, a whole network of feminist activists that is very, very well articulated in Brazil. They have come up with together with rural women and farmers, that they're also part of this network, with the agroecological logbooks. The agroecological logbooks are a set of political and pedagogical tools, a methodology. It's an innovation, but it's also a learning process, and that visualizes the invisibilized work of women in agroecology. And mostly, in the first instance, this was the motivation. The motivation for this was to have proof, to actually be able to lobby and to have a better point of standing in the feminist movement in agroecology. So how it works, I'll be very quick. Hopefully we can get into details afterwards. We have a book where we have 4 columns: consumed, donated, exchanged, and sold, that you can see in the left corner. And women start writing all of their produce and how much that produce would be worth if they had to buy it, how much they would have to pay if they would have to buy it on the local market, giving an idea on a weekly, monthly, and yearly basis of the production of women that was not monetary and therefore invisible, and now made monetary. They make an agroecological biodiversity map where they map the spaces where women and where the men work. Surprise, surprise. Most women are almost everywhere in the production system working, and the male are only present in 1 or 2 spaces. And the most important is the roda de conversa, the circle of dialogue, where women talk about these results, gather the results that they are gathering themselves, about themselves, and start to critically question what this means, right? And what does it show about their position in their households, in their communities, and in the society. So this has generated a lot of proof, among many other things. And they have shown to create, this is in the northeast of Brazil, in Bahia, so more than 1,228 types of products, some of them plant, animal-based, or others are recycled materials. And so this shows the diversity and creates proof, finally, for the first time, of something that was completely kept in the dark. So with this, the Brazilian rural woman network, and this is not only a rural woman, this is an intersectional, open to queer and trans, of course, gender in a very broad way. They have been really guarding the social values of agroecology and creating a critical shift within the national agroecology movement, proving that sustainable ecosystems cannot coexist with domestic violence, oppression in any kind of form. Women have really transitioned from being invisible helpers to central protagonists, using spaces like the Marcha das Margaridas, which is the biggest rural march, I think, in the world, but at least of Latin America, of rural women. And that helped to push for national policies that recognize their specific needs and the situation that still has to better a lot. However, the tension remains, and very often male leadership struggles to accept protagonism of women side by side by men. This is so even within agroecological movements, MST and other kind of peasant movements. So that's why with the feminist network, we always say, without feminism, there is no agroecology. And if there's racism, it is not agroecology. And we take really a strong stance here because we understand that it's also a political stance. Agroecology, as it also evolves always power, it's always political. And so why do I want to talk about this case? Because very often we forget that agroecology's social foundations aren't an add-on element. They're not one, but also not four added elements. They are a thread and they have to be transversal through all of the 14 elements that we talk. And so if you miss that, if you think you can just add a social scientist to your project and then you're done, then you've missed agroecology entirely. That is my own quote. So agroecology has gained a lot of, why does this matter? Well, this thread is exactly what gets cut when practices move into institutions. And so agroecology has gained popularity and entered a period of institutionalization, adopting it to official teaching, research, extension services, and whatnot, which brought a lot of positive things, of course, and a lot of money that helped to work with projects. But in turn, it also brought a fragmentation of its meaning. And this is what I call the bureaucratic funnel. What happens is a form of elite capture that grassroots ecological practices are captured by a corporate mentality that, for example, wants to create administrative, easy checked audits and checklists, does a lot of cherry picking, that depoliticizes agroecology, reducing it to technical fixes, low input, soil health, and takes these siloed, evading the land, racial, and gender justice struggles that agroecology is meant to confront. And of course, also is stuck within a capitalist rationale that and funding schemes that, wanted or unwantedly, I don't want to put all institutions that work with agroecology as evil, but wanted or unwantedly, they often are locked in this rationale in which they also need funding, for example, from the UN or other institutions, and they create this productivist, quantitative focus only in order to get funding secured. And so this can go really far. And just an idea to show this is that Bayer is using the same vocabulary, right? I've been on meetings when it was still Monsanto that was named Agroecology 3 or 4 years ago, which is very worrying. And as you can see, terms that are vaguely connected or people are connecting them to agroecology can have a really, really different feeling than what the outside proposes, right? And so what this means is, if we go back to the agroecological logbooks, how this happened or what happened with institutionalization is that the institutions funding some of the projects with the agroecological logbooks were the first to put their logo on the agroecological logbooks and act as if it was their own invention. Also claiming that the data that it produced was their impact instead of something that they had neglected for a long time. And so things that happened, for example, was that there was no questioning of the division of domestic labor, as if the domestic labor and the unequal domestic burden of domestic labor isn't directly tied to being able to do agroecological practices and biodiversity. There was a minimal interest in increasing women's agency, self-esteem, and self-worth through this process, which is the main goal of the feminist movement with this tool. And they were not prioritizing, financing the devaluation of the total results to the participating woman. That was not important anymore. So having the woman receive the total amount of what they produced, what it means, starting to critically reflect upon what the data that they have gathered themselves meant, was not a priority for IFET. And so this is just some of the examples, but there are many, 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 unfortunately. And so what we see is that we have to kind of make clear what the difference is between integration and transversalization. When we talk about integration, it's often minorities existing, including and incorporating minorities in already existing frameworks, placing representation, counting, or gender indicators or workshop seat quotas, and other forms of compliance checks that leave the core colonial technocratic hierarchies out, right? And so it's not about transforming land ownership, domestic work, and institutional power. And it's not transforming who controls and defines the agroecological agenda. So I just want to remind how important it is to keep constantly in mind that institutions are not politically neutral, and they are sites of active contestation, and we must stay vigilant for reformists. So a little bit more positive. So what can we do then? Because I think the alternatives exist. So what we can do is stay politically vigilant. This means, for example, knowing what the strategies are to neutralize the transformative potential of agroecology. For example, simplification to technical properties. We talked about that already. Portraying unequal and unrelated concepts. So talking about climate smart agriculture, precision agriculture, and naming that together with agroecology. But also adding vagueness, for example, like, well, there's no consensus about what agroecology actually is, and so we can just go on as we did. So what we can do is weld agronomic sciences always to social movements and the disciplines that have more critical social perspectives, like, for example, feminist political ecology, critical race theory, and decolonial sociology. So to make that more concrete, some examples, and I'm over time, so I'm trying to go quickly through them, really lose the idea of neutrality and focus on positionality, right? Have epistemic humility, so make sure that the credentials and the timeline serve the democratic veto and authority of the communities. For example, go into engaged research. And this also means taking sides and understanding that agroecology is inherently political and therefore political contestation. For practitioners, for example, to avoid distributing technology packages or biological solutions that are blind to household gender divisions. And also, this is a very important one, which goes to the institutional thing, demand funding and matrix that support structural societal transformations instead of corporate aligned certifications and only quantitative measures. So lastly, demands what I want to ask you, and maybe we can move that to the questions also of today, the talk, is does when you're working on an initiative, when you're working in a group, does this actively challenge gender and racial hierarchies in a transversal way? But very importantly, what lens do I take in this initiative? With what perspective do I look at this? And what is my social political location? What is my power and where is my privilege? Does this treat food and commons good as a commodity? And what practices fit into this terminology when, for example, a broad terminology is used that are actually counter to agroecology? Also, governance. Is this initiative decentralized or self-organized or highly centralized and pyramidal? So these are the things, the questions I want to leave you with. I hope these are some of the reference. I hope it made you think a little bit and we can talk about it later. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Great talk. Thank you also for this really critical inputs. And I'm looking forward to the discussion afterwards. But now let's hear about moving towards good, clean, and fair food systems. Julia, the stage is yours. You can start sharing your slides.
Yeah, I'll put my screen up. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes, I can hear you.
Mm,
Looks good.
looks good. Great.
Yes, it does.
Well, thanks for welcoming me this discussion. And it was really interesting. I think the combination of the one before and this one, because I think indeed we're tackling a bit different aspects, and also because of the inherent quality of let's say the inherent way that slow food is, that we are more a movement. I will maybe talk less about like what it means in terms of academics. But so yeah, to get right into it, we yeah, the simple observation, which also came out previously, is that agroecology has made a lot of advancements. I mean, there's still a long way ahead, unfortunately, but I think more and more we see it being recognized also in terms of agricultural practices. But unfortunately, often it's losing the more social values principle, and we see it as kind of underrated within policy, at least. I work with the European Union a lot, and they never really understand agroecology as a political movement, but really more as a set of as a really agricultural practice only. And so the work of slow food is really to challenge that more and more, because for us food is political, and agroecology is the framing that we use to implement what we want to see, which is good, clean, and fair food for all. And so as slow food, we in the last year we've taken the agroecological principles that were developed, the 13, and kind of translated it for the slow food network. And so in this conversation, we'll go more into the good food for all, which is the one that is more linked to the social values and diets. For those who don't know slow food, we are a movement of farmers, shepherds, food artisans, cooks, eaters, and really any food-related actor from all around the world. So we're a grassroots network. And it was born precisely to respond to quite a drastic change and shift in diets in the 80s, when advertisement was kind of changing a bit the way that people ate, at least in Europe and notably in Italy, where slow food was born as a response to the fast food movement, or the fast food installation. And so really it was a very cultural response from its roots, and to kind of call out the standardization of food. So the fact that in a fast food, every fast food has a very clear set of menus, and the franchising then makes it quite standard. But not only in restaurants, I'm talking also about retail. It was a response to the disconnection from culture that food was becoming, and this is due to the fact that it was being reduced to a commodity as it is today. And so as a contrast, we defend the right to food which also means the right to pleasure and to taste. And that's not something superficial for us or hedonistic, let's say, but it's because pleasurable often means as well for us means healthy and nutritious and socially and culturally appropriate. So what do we mean by that? Is that in the way that we operationalize the different agroecology principles, we've so translated them into good, clean, and fair food for all. In the good parts, and this is, by the way, the food system approach that goes from the production to the consumption. And for the good food for all aspects, when we say it has to be healthy and nutritious, this is because good food makes you feel full and there is a reaction in your body and it has a positive impact also on your health. And so really talking about the relationship between food and our bodies. And then the second point is looking at the socially and culturally appropriate food, which is more from a food sovereignty angle, in the sense that communities all around the world should be able to choose what they put in their bodies and what they want to eat. It's a freedom that we all require and is part of the right to food. And this is why it should be appropriate to the places that we are and not standard from all and globe. So not standard and operating on a global level for everyone equally or similarly, let's say. So for us, it's not only about the individual choice, but it's that diets are constructed socially and culturally, and they're shaped by not only what we decide to eat, but everything else also around us. So how markets function and what knowledge is transmitted and what food environments make possible. And I'll go into the food environment concept in a moment. But basically, for us, this principle operates in kind of three interconnected axes, which is that biodiversity and culture are inseparable. That access to good food is a matter of social justice, and that knowledge and education then shape as well our ability to eat well. And ultimately, all these 3 points are about reconnecting producers and eaters and putting food as the center of our social fabric, as it's been in previous centuries. But now we've seen that there has been a disconnection between that, which has then led to what I was mentioning earlier about the commodification of food, which has become an object like any other, rather than a living thing that changes and adapts and is different every time, because it's also connected to nature, and nature has a degree of unpredictability. So yeah, really rebuilding the fact that food is not just there's not always going to be a yellow banana or a red tomato, but that there can be a wide array of different types, and then recognizing that in the way it is produced then has an impact also on how we eat, and so yeah, basically the relationship that we have both with the production and the consumption. So in terms of operationalizing the concept itself within the slow food activities, the first point that I mentioned was biodiversity, which then has an impact on diets, because for what is at the core for us is that if we lose biodiversity, we lose our food cultures, and then we lose our capacity to have healthy diets on our plates. And so it's not only about conservationism, but it's really about our menus. For example, I don't know if you've seen, but I think last year or so there was a study about they analyzed an apple species that was from 100 years ago, and then an apple like the standard apple that you would find in in supermarkets that is most accessible today. And the level of nutrients had really like diminished so much from the two, showing that, well, what was once in nature is not at all what we have now on our plates, but maybe you will have a very pink, shiny apple, but in terms of then nutritional and added value, it's completely lacking. So yeah, basically the key point for us is that diversity in the field also means diversity in diets. And we see that traditional varieties, local breeds, and underutilized crops, which are then more adapted to local ecosystems, are also then creating a healthier diet itself. And another point is that since food is not just all nutrients, it's connected to identity, memory, pleasure, and social connections. This also has a link to diet quality, because foods that are culturally meaningful and pleasurable are also more likely to sustain long-term dietary change. And to do this, slow food works on different aspects, different programs. So in terms of biodiversity protection, we have the Arc of Taste and the Presidia, which are basically programs that are to categorize and put together all the breeds that are suffering from extinction or that are less and less known. So you can find these repertories online. It's quite fun to go see the very niche species that exist. But it's a work so that we do very much at the producer level. And aside from also selecting just the breeds and the diets, we also look at production techniques. And this is important because the production, it's about knowledge then. And the production techniques are often then linked as well to how then we will cook or consume the food. And it's then linked as well to home cooking and the local foodways and techniques that we have in our culinary traditions. So this is on the biodiversity side and why it has a direct impact on what we have on our plates. Moving forward, we also have the second pillar that I was mentioning, which is, of course, social justice and food environments, which acts like here we address a fundamental reality that there are today, basically, we've accepted that there are two types of diets. One, the people that can afford quality food and those who cannot. And we think that that's okay. But that makes access to good food deeply, deeply unequal. And we see that this is not only about income, but it's mainly shaped by food environments. And so what is available, what is affordable, what is promoted. I've briefly put a graph about, if you don't know the concept of food environments, what it exactly is. But in bad words, let's say, to translate this complicated graph is that food environments are dominated by ultra-processed products, large retail chain, and globalized value chains, which means that the easiest choices are often the least healthy and least sustainable. And so this makes us look at tackling structural issues, which includes the lack of market access for small-scale producers, concentration of power in the food system, and pricing that ignores the true cost of food. This is because often cheap food externalizes environmental degradation, health costs. Public health, like costs that then it has on public health systems, and of course social inequalities, labor rights. So there's a series of numbers that are not calculating within the final price that we have in the supermarkets, and all these different factors then make what are our food environments today. And so Slow Food advocates for food environments where good, clean, and fair food becomes the default and not just the privilege. And this includes operating on different kind of levels. A lot of our activities go into mobilizing for public procurement, so food that is served in schools and canteens, and also hospitals, prisons, so any food that is paid by the state, which we've recognized as a very low-hanging fruit for policymakers. I think this is just a side note, but it's an important one because it's a very easy way to access quite a few people and change the way that they perceive what could be a good diet. Then we work on market support for local producers through programs like our earth markets, so farmers markets, and just ensuring that there is facilitating basically the entry of our farmers in markets where they can be paid for their fair price. And then we work as well at the EU level, at least, on policies looking at unhealthy food environments, as well as marketing of processed food, for example. So yeah, this is more at political level, but basically, yeah, linking really agricultural, food, and social policies to then ameliorate the food environment, the final food environment. Moving on to the third point, because I think also we don't have so much time then for the discussion, and I'll try to go quite fast then. So this point is about education and in its broadest sense. So not only education in schools, but this is education in life, let's say, because even when access exists, that doesn't mean that everyone has the capacity to eat well. What we've seen is that there is an erosion of cooking skills, of food knowledge, of cultural transmission of recipes, of what it means to cook. That's also due to our lifestyles today. So of course, we don't think it's easy to just say, oh, cook your own food at home. I think today there are realities that really block us from that. And so we try to work to educate people who are living these ultra-paced lifestyles in terms of taste education, to work with them in terms of taste education. We have school gardens in schools to show from a very early age to children where their food comes from and how food is grown. We also work on community-based learning. Working with our local communities at grassroots level to have events, gatherings around slow food products. And last but not least, the two last point, I think, again, go back to the connections, which is the earth markets or farmers markets, because that's where really we can create a relationship between what is produced and consumed, and that valorizes much more what we can then the meaning that we put in our food. So yeah, the rebuilding the relationships is for us the really most important points, because when this relationship is restored, then food is not reduced to just a commodity. Quickly going through the drivers of change. I think what we can say that we're not starting directly from zero. We do see a demand for local and artisanal food, and a renewed interest in heritage species and breeds. This is also in part a trend, because there is a growing awareness of health and well-being. But this is also in part a need, because we see that climate risks and climate change is impacting the way we produce, and that this raised climate awareness also means that we have to go back to these these already locally adapted breeds. And so even in terms of policies for climate risk management, we have more and more people that are looking into biodiversity as a way to create a resilient production. Of course, this comes a bit too late, I have to say, but it's picking up more and more. I think maybe the amount of degrees that we have now in Europe can be also a wake-up call for our policymakers, hopefully. But yeah, this is something that is slowly being picked up. And then in terms of barriers and tensions and challenges for implementation, of course, there is the structural lock-ins. As I mentioned, the food environments dominated by retail, concentration, and global supply chains. And then the policies that then support large-scale production models, which we didn't get into, but we can get into after. And so that individual choice alone then doesn't drive the dietary transformation needed. There is, of course, the issue between accessibility and values that is linked to the livelihood crisis that we are going through, that people have low incomes, and then that is not, and the prices that are not reflected. And so there is a whole monetary question also behind. And then there is also the knowledge erosion that I was mentioning earlier as well, in terms of the loss of cooking skills and the dominance of kind of convenience and fast food habits, which creates then a paradox, because even when access exists, sometimes the capacity to use the food is missing. And all these three things, I think, are well reflected into policy misalignments, which I think is really important to note, that today our policies are made in silos. We have agricultural policy, health policy, cultural policies, and we're really lacking this food system approach at governance and political ambition. So this is something that I think once we overcome this siloed approach, it will be much easier as well to create links in between and to shift to better diets. So yeah, this was a quick overview of the work that Slow Food does. I think the key point is that diets are not downstream of production, and that culture is not just a soft dimension. It's really like a key lever for change and for implementing agroecology that is meaningful and that can last in the long term as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julia. Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Does anyone have any question? I can't see any hands raised.
I can start with one.
Okay.
I would first like to start with Esther. And I was interested in knowing, like, when you first started this logbook and started to approach the women in maybe the village, the region, how was their first kind of feedback on it? Did you have the feeling that they exactly knew, like, that you addressed something that they already felt a lot? And how did it maybe change towards the end? That would be really interesting to know.
Yes, so thanks, Julia. So first up, I need to say that the agroecological logbook started to be developed in 2008, and I wasn't part of that initial movement, and they were developed with rural women, right? So it was a conversation, a collective conversation already about, oh, I'm so tired the whole day, and I don't have time to even go to the bathroom. What's happening, right? And how can we kind of make that visible? And so that has been growing from Minas Gerais, where it started, with the Center for Alternative Technology, and through the GT Mulheres de Ana, this feminist network of Brazil, it has been expanding through all of Brazil and becoming really popular. And now also some state agencies have been adopting it, but again, with good intentions, but sometimes the critical part is somewhat left out. And so when the women and the communities I work with, mostly in the Northeast, in Bahia, that's very different because you have a feminist movement that has been articulating itself since the 90s. And so some women are part of this network and they have been part of constantly this building movement, articulating, going to gatherings together, speaking up, protesting, doing lobbying. Of course, for those women, this was an easy grab, right?
Yes.
And so you see that some of the women, but maybe then their neighbor has a very different experience, right? And so what you see mostly is the first reaction is, can I even do it? Of course, there's a problem when you want to write things down. You're already excluding people because of literacy issues. And so, for example, the importance of this agroecological logbook is that it is really inherent in the social movement, right? Not only to make sure that it stays critical and these social values are at core, but also because they have networks everywhere locally in the territories. And so you have a local kind of social worker or agroecological worker that is accompanying these women, and kind of together in conversation with each other, they are learning about what this process is telling them, right? And so you see women that start not even looking at me. They wouldn't, they wouldn't, there's really, patriarchy is everywhere, but it's really strongly, like really violently articulated, very obvious in many of these communities. And so you have to go past the space where women don't think that whatever they can share is useful. Because if I cannot read and write, then whatever I'm saying is not important. So it's a really slow process. It looks like it's from one day to another, but no, this is years. And so I've seen transformation from women that started, and in 2 years they really have transformed their lives. Some of them have actually separated for their husbands because they made it impossible for them to even take part in agroecological logbooks in this network. And so it really has been transgressive and really breaking with the household, like on a really intimate level, on a community level, but also on a societal level. And that doesn't go quickly, right? Before
of
a
course it
woman,
doesn't.
many of the women tell stories of, first I didn't dare to speak up, never, and now I speak up, and now we get together with my colleagues and we go to the community meetings and we demand things. And so this is a slow process, of course, but it's something done. Let me be clear about this. This is something that, for example, me as an external, I have nothing to do with it. They do it themselves, right? It is a collective conversation, and through these pedagogical tools, they really start to create this critical consciousness of, why am I actually learning? I'm actually earning like a minimum income in a monthly
Experience.
scale, but I haven't changed anything. So this means that I've been earning this all my life, but I thought I was just helping, right? And so this goes really slow through all kind of dynamics and conversations. Mostly women learn through the others. So when you have one that is already quite pronounced and has gone through this transformation already, or has been born maybe in the feminist movement, then you'll see that they'll tell their stories and the other women listen, and bit by bit, and they come to the gathering. So it's a really social transformation process that is really slow. And some women, didn't want to do it, also because it takes a lot of time, right? Writing everything down. And so So of course, those that are interested, they join, and bit by bit, more and more people are joining. But there are a lot of challenges because very often the male, for example, doesn't want them to join because they get jealous and they cannot go out of their homes, for example, or stay a night somewhere else, so they cannot travel. And so this is it's challenging even participating in this. Yeah, sorry, I could go for hours.
Okay, thank you very much, Esther. I can't see any hands raised, but and there are no questions in the chat. But we have a remark. Thank you we have here a remark in the chat. Thank you for the very inspired talk. Organic farming in Austria starts embracing agroecological principles more and more, but our agricultural and food systems are much more industrialized and integrated into global markets. Which experience from Brazil do you think are particularly relevant for Europe? This is for Esther again. And in your view, what political, economic, and or social conditions are crucial for agroecological approaches to develop successfully? Okay, so in other words, where do you currently see the most important research areas for agroecology in Europe?
Yes, thank you for that question, Anna, because I wanted to say it in my talk, but I had really short time. So thank you, so I can expand. So I wanted to say before, this seems like a very specific Brazilian context. And when you look at agroecology, especially agroecology as a movement, it is very much it is very much an articulated movement as nowhere else. But we see actually, I live here in the north of Spain, Asturias, and I see more comparison with sometimes with Asturias and the rural areas here, the women groups and how they articulate themselves than, for example, in northern Argentina, where my roots are. And so I think, of course, we are in a global commodity market, so they are all connected. So whatever happens in Brazil, and especially what happens in Europe, is connected. The new Mercosur treaty is there to really, really harm all agroecological practices in Europe and in, for example, Latin America. But I see that there is what happens mostly in Europe is this institutionalization, right? It's what we get in the northern, if I can say so very quickly, hemisphere, where we want to do agroecological approaches. And then we think, oh, well, we get a social scientist and they do some political, social thing, and then we have it all integrated, right? Instead of really having a critical social science look into the whole project as itself, right? For me, all scientists should ask themselves certain political questions. And so I see that the most important thing in research, especially in Europe, is to kind of be able to connect, to stay connected to these critical social, not only theories, but the movements that are also existing in Europe. For example, we have Agroecology Europe. They have come to Brazil. I've welcomed them also in Brazil, and they've showed they've been having a lot of cross fertilization and learning also of how we do the things in Brazil. And so I think there's not one research area. Of course, we're talking about agroecology. It's about, like Julia also said, making sure it's not looked into in silos, right? And that they are always connected to the political, to the critical, and thinking about where is power in this research, where's power in the system, who decides what the research questions are, how can we do that together. This is also something that is not happening in Europe. We are actually not so different, and this place of woman and intersectional lenses on agriculture for example, in the Netherlands, is not so different than Brazil. Women are not even taken part as a possible, if they're daughters from a farmer, they are not even taken to account as a possible next holder of the farm. So this is a
Esther, may
problem
I
that goes
interrupt you
through
here?
everywhere. Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
because we are
Yeah.
already towards the end. Julia, I just wanted to give you the opportunity if you would like to add something to this quickly.
No, I mean, I know that we're over time, so
Yeah.
so no worries. I think the key points were mentioned. I think keep it political is the main thing. Keep it
Yeah.
political and join grassroots movements. Yeah, it's my key point.
Thank you. I also posted both of your email addresses here in case somebody has some follow-up questions. And as I mentioned, we have this community, so please join there. You can keep discussing there or asking questions. And yeah, with this, we actually come to an end. So I want to thank you for your active participation and in the discussing the social values in your diets. And first of all, big thank you to the speakers for your excellent contributions, to the task group for planning the event and for the Argus team to organize it. And of course, all of you for being here during this heat wave. I hope you have some chance to cool off now. And we've reached the summer break, so our next conversation will be held in September on the 30th. And the topic will be the principle of co-creation of knowledge. And we will let you know about the speakers and the title soon. And if you have any ideas for upcoming conversations, topics you would like to have, or you have colleagues you would want to join the email list, you can always contact us. And yes, with this, we look forward to seeing you again after our summer break. And I wish you a beautiful summertime. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye bye.